Welcome back, viewers, to this edition of Focus on Africans. Today we are meeting a Kenyan brother. He's one of the leading intellectuals, the leading African intellectuals in the Netherlands. His name is Antony Otieno. Brother Antony.
Yes.
How are you doing?
I'm fine.
Okay, welcome to Focus on Africans. And this is a program where we try to share ideas about Africa and how we can move the development agenda of Africa forward. Who is Antony Otieno? Can you tell us something about yourself?
Yes, it's not very easy to. It's always not a simple answer to that kind of question because self-knowledge is an ongoing process.
Okay.
And even here in the diaspora makes it quite complicated.
Tell us about your upbringing. Where were you born and stuff?
Yes, I was born. I'm a Kenyan African by origin, and I come from an area close to what the British call Lake Victoria. The village is called Asembo. It is 50 kilometers from from Kisumu, the third largest city in Kenya.
Okay.
And that's where I grew up, in a small village called Luwak.
Luwak.
Yes, and this was an old mission post where the first Dutch missionaries to Western Kenya.
Dutch missionaries?
Yes, arrived in 1946. So I was born in a hospital within this mission post and went to nursery school in the same mission post. And later after I went up to primary school in the same place.
In the same place, okay. What do you remember from your upbringing? What childhood experience do you remember?
Yes, a lot of things. So we had mixed experiences. First, I had both my African upbringing and a little bit of Western influence from the Dutch missionaries. Basically through schooling and also church activities. I grew up going to a nursery school which was run by Dutch nuns. And as we grew up, you learn to be in the church environment. So I was an altar boy helping with the priests from when I was already 8. And
was this a job you enjoyed doing?
Yes, it was something. It was connected to the new spirituality that we got from the Dutch missionary, but also from our parents. Because spirituality was not just a new thing. Africans are always spiritual. And that this was just another version of it. So both versions had an influence on me. And again, if I think about it, I realize nowadays that there was not much difference compared to what my mother believed in. And
what the Reverend Father was teaching you?
Yes, in terms of how to relate to people, care for family, for society, and all these things. And again, if you talk of the concepts of love in the Bible, love God, love for God, love for neighbor, those are things we enshrined, and it was always there.
Can you tell us something about Kenya, the country?
Kenya. Yeah. Kenya is, as you know, from what you probably read and listen to.
And there are unique things people should know.
Yes, Kenya is not that unique from other African countries, despite the complexity that exists in the country. You find the same in other African countries. So first, Kenya as a country is
got a beautiful environment, big mountains, and.
But first, if I have to describe it, I can say in terms of nature, Kenya is very beautiful and endowed with a lot of resources. But also, through Kenya, you go through about 4 climate conditions at the same time.
Really?
Yes.
4 climate conditions.
Yes. So in one journey from
the equator.
Yes, we are close to the equator. That's one climatic condition. There is the region around the sea, which is humid and warm.
The Mombasa area?
Yes, and you have the lake region where I come from, which is dry and cool, and also with rains. And then you have the northern Kenya, which is more desert-like.
Savannah?
No, desert-like.
Really?
Yes. And then you have the middle part where it's green and as you move from the green area, then you approach savannah, and then you end up with the lake.
Okay.
The plateaus, and then...
So a lot of contrast in the...
Yes.
Okay.
And that shapes also culture in terms of food...
the type of food you eat.
Food productivity, but also what kind of activity, both economic and others.
Naturally, okay.
Including sports, because some of us, based on where we come from, the conditions, the physical conditions have shaped what kind of sports people take up. Yeah,
I was going to ask you. I'm going to ask you that question later. So, how did Antony come to Europe?
Yes, Antony came to Europe first through a scholarship to study in Sweden.
You first went to Sweden?
Yes.
On scholarship?
On scholarship from Uppsala University.
What were you studying there?
There I was studying management of health and psychosocial services.
Psychosocial services?
Yes, this is because I was already working with community development programs.
Back in Kenya?
Back in Kenya, which was helping families and children in difficult circumstances.
Okay.
So this was a program which was meant for people working in developing countries.
All right. Who sponsored you?
No, it was sponsored by the Swedish government through SIDA, Swedish Development Agency.
Okay.
Yes.
So apart from looking at the blonde Swedes, what exactly did you do in Sweden?
No, I went to Sweden as a mature student somehow, because I already studied in Kenya and I'd worked. Even before I went to work in charity area, I was already a manager of a 5-star hotel, and I left that to go to work in community. Okay. So besides those experiences, I knew that I still needed to study more at some point, especially when I worked with community issues. You realize that you can help people to a certain extent, but then there are other complications with the system in place. That confronts you, even if you have so much resources.
You said you were managing a big hotel. Then you went to work for...
Then I resigned from this work.
To go work in the community...
I went to work with the Street Children project.
Really?
Yes.
What informed your decision?
Yes, I studied human resource management in the first place. That's why I became a human resource manager of a 5-star hotel. But then I realized, because of my choice for work with people, that's why I took on human resource management. And then my goal was to create an environment in which workers can also have a living wage and also produce for the owner of the capital. But then all these principles were betrayed by the way the owner of the hotel was functioning and some people around it, which meant giving low wages and not keeping their promises on things that were agreed, and not providing for the right kind of working conditions, which I had made sure that I secured from the government to make sure that they got licenses and everything. And then they explained to me that once this is in order, we are going to increase wages for people, and that's what I promised the workers. And you know that, and when I organize things, so for example, they didn't deliver. And when you organize, for example, when people working at night, you arrange transport for them to be dropped at a point. Someone diverts the vehicle to another direction. Then they delay to go home, and then the family suffer. And you expect these people to perform in the morning. And those kind of things, I said, were against my principles for being there. And they were making millions of dollars for that. And I said, but I didn't study for economic reasons in the first place, just to better the human condition. That was my main goal. So I said, who would benefit from my skills much better? I said, maybe it's those children who don't have anyone to fight for them, and families. So that's why.
But many people, as long as they're getting their wages, they don't care about the social aspect of their work.
Yes, I know. I was promised a car and a house within the hotel environment. But some of the things, it depends on how you're brought up. That brings me back to the question when you ask me how was I brought up. So the influence I had from my childhood informed my principles and choices in life. And my parents, my mother was caring for people around us all the time. So my family is more...
It was a normal thing for you to...
Yes, care-oriented. And I became more conscious about these issues. So the moment you start oppressing people or facing conditions of marginalization, then my instincts come out strongly in reaction to what
you feel like doing something about it.
Yes. Either doing something about it or expressing my dissatisfaction with it, and thinking of alternatives.
So what did you study in Sweden then?
So when I resigned from the hotel work, I went to work with the street children, and there I did a lot of things, traveling to Tanzania, other countries, to bring children back to different parts of Kenya.
Okay.
Also working with government departments on the rights of children and giving better care and so on. And in the process, I encountered also problems with the system.
Okay.
So, from a working context, I had difficulties there on matters of principle. And when I came to my work with the needy people, you realize that you could help up to a certain extent. We got some help from some organizations and from abroad, but despite the resources we had, the system was blocking effective service delivery and many other things. And that meant you really have to understand what kind of people you're working with.
All right.
So understanding the government and its operations and everything about it. That meant I said then I need to go back to get some knowledge again on how to tackle some of these things.
That's why you went back to school?
Yes, at another level.
Okay. You studied in Sweden. Yes. What did you study?
So when I went to Sweden, because management was my background, so I decided I wanted to take on a master's degree in human resource management.
Okay.
But while I was there, because of my working with the street children, I had the scholarship to do the management of health. Okay. And then when I finished that, when I passed my first exams, they gave me a second chance to advance to the next level. So that gave me a chance to complete part of the study in Kenya. And when I finished, I applied for a new field of study. So that's when I decided to change to political science. Okay. So after my studies in Uppsala in management of health and psychosocial services, I decided also to take on a new field, and that's why I decided to study political science, combined with development studies.
That was in Sweden?
Yes.
Okay. For how long altogether? For how long were you in Sweden?
So in total, I had a period of 4 years.
In Sweden?
Yes.
And let's move.
4 years of full-time study.
Okay, let's move now to Holland. What brought you to Holland?
Yes, so when I finished my master's in development studies at Stockholm University, then I was thinking of moving on to do my PhD. And within the same period, I still had work in Kenya. Okay. With 2 other organizations based in England, and my own organization I founded in Kenya, which I managed from a distance, but also because I developed a team on the ground who could manage things. Yes. Not on my, it was...
we'll talk about the organization.
Yes. So once I realized that within this same time, a lot of things were happening in Kenya itself, but also I thought of to what extent should I go with my personal development in order to be effective in the things I wish to do. Yes, I think maybe if I've started doing this, why can't I just complete it? Probably by doing a PhD, and then that would equip me well to deal with these issues, because I was a hands-on person, I was from the grassroots. Okay. But then also it would equip me to deal with more abstract questions, but also the challenges that they always present to us as the explanation for why they're doing things or not.
So you're busy with your PhD at the moment?
So that's why when I finished my master's, I decided to come to the Netherlands for my internship with an international institute here in Amsterdam called Transnational Institute. Okay. That's a more left think tank, which was a fitting environment for me because there was freedom to do research within Europe and Africa, and also with Latin America, which was very good. And in the process, I got my first admission at Free University in Amsterdam. Okay. Yes. So that's how I ended up being in the Netherlands. Okay. And since that move, there have been a lot of activities. From Transnational Institute are the possibilities to develop new networks in the academia, but also within civil society, which gave me more possibilities for research. And also later,
we are going to talk about your research areas soon. We'll take this short break. When we come back, we'll continue with Brother Antony.
On this program, Focus on Africans, hosted by the popular Pan-African writer Femi Akomolafe, who has devoted his entire life to championing African cause. We highlight this problem and try to look for solution. Focus on Africans is a program to watch to meet with those with passion to build a better African for ourselves and the coming generations. Focus on Africans. Together, we can build a better Africa.
Come back, viewers. We're still on the Focus on Africans, and our guest today is Mr. Antony Otieno. He's a Kenyan intellectual in the Netherlands. You were talking about your research. What is what area are you researching it?
Yes, my background is politics and development, and that covers a lot of issues. And for that reason, at the moment, I'm focused mostly on migration and development. Migration and development. Yes, but also conflict and peace building. Conflict and peace building. Yes. Okay. And I'm looking at that from a perspective of how could the diasporas be part of political processes at home in Africa, which includes peace building and also other development potentials which they can give to Africa based on their experiences in the diaspora. Okay. What are your experiences in the Netherlands, if I may ask you? I mean, you meet a lot of people, and then yes, coming from African background, you move to Sweden. Yes, there's a big difference between these contexts based on the host country context itself, but also the kind of interactions you have with people from Africa. These reactions or perceptions and ways in which people do things, I mean from Africa, is determined by the conditions in the host countries. Okay. Sweden has possibilities, especially for people to do a lot of things, studies, and also in terms of social welfare, which supports people in different things. The Netherlands, another context, and access to possibilities are not that similar to Sweden. But then Netherlands is a little bit open, so you meet a lot of people, people with international backgrounds, or organizations working internationally. So for your area of study is much more better. It's much more conducive because of the research background. Yeah, you are dealing with migration. Yes. Okay. What do you think of this notion that Africa, what they call brain drain in Africa? A lot of African intellectuals contributing to European societies. What are your opinions about this thing? Yes, the brain drain is, I would think we need to understand who has invented the concept of brain drain. Yeah, that's why I ask you, if you can please explain to us. Yes, if I think of many Africans I know, including my own experiences, I won't call what I'm going through or what Kenya might be experiencing because of my absence as brain drain. People left Africa because of many reasons, and lots of them were push factors. So they were pushed out. Yes, or some factors made them to leave. Conditional, either because of bad regimes or just economic conditions. Despite people having qualifications, they could not get jobs. But then when people come to Europe, I've noticed and I've experienced that many are still tied to their home countries. And people are beginning to give things back in different ways. Okay. But that depends on what... It's not a total loss to Africa. It's not a total loss to Africa. It's just because the regimes in Africa have not structured a way through which people can plow back what they've experienced abroad. Okay, if someone asks you what... if a regime in Africa asks you, give us an idea what you think we can do to help intellectuals to come back and help with the development. What suggestions do you have for them? It's just providing the right working conditions for doing that. I've been in a classroom in this setting at a university, and I know what kind of facilities are necessary which enables you to do things effectively. That's what you need at home. And those are not provided in Africa. I'm not saying they're not provided, but they should look back and think if they have those possibilities. They will not move out. Yes, because it is these kind of conditions which gives room for innovation when people have time to think. Yes, if you're still worried about where to sit or where to get your food, yes, or struggling, or power is still, there's a blackout in an office, you cannot write and things like that, while there's a deadline with publications and so on, these kind of things cannot work anymore. But it's not sort of going in circle. These things are not going to happen without the African brains.
And whom do we expect to produce and to provide them for us?
No, I think the problem is with the politics at home. There's need for the political will. If there's political will in Africa, these things are possible to be done. Because many people are willing to do things back home. Hence the remittance volumes that you see, both from West Africa to East Africa, South Africa. Why are people sending that kind of money? Because they value their country. So why would you not bring your knowledge?
Yeah, that's bring us to this question. You live in Europe.
Yes.
Are there things you miss in Africa?
Yes, there are things I miss in Africa. We have so much that I would say Europe has lost.
Like
through the process of so-called modernization and development.
Can you give an example?
Yes, the social dimension of life is gone here.
The social dimension.
Yes, technological development is one thing, but life is not just about technology. Yes, the human element,
spirituality,
and spirituality, which paradoxical enough, they are searching for it in Asian religions. Well, this is where Christianity came from in the first place. So people rejected Christianity because of materialism and many other things. And now, finally, when you've lost everything, you start looking for philosophical religions. Hence, they are going down south.
You mean people from Europe?
Yes. Why are they heading down to India, to other places?
They're questing for spirituality.
Yeah, because spirituality is an element of human condition which you cannot do away with. And human relations is also another part which you cannot get. So the living conditions here, for example, you ask me, relatedness, I argue, is one element which enables people to exist. It's an ingredient of living. So the moment a system links you from being related to others, yes, you become very vulnerable.
So you would suggest that we should be very careful in what we, the technology,
how much we get rid of in Africa, because otherwise we continue with the old process of Africans being told whatever you had was not the right thing. Thus, hence we left our religions, our ways of practicing faith, our ways of doing everything in Africa, because we were told people could not even drink anything green, because anything green is not processed. It's not good. But also, some Christian churches will not accept people drinking herbal medicine. Well, if you bring the same medicine in tablet form, which is white, they will take it. People are not eating ugali, the food in East Africa.
Because
there's a brown one made from millet, which is very rich in nutrition, which has got a lot of nutrition content. But people would not eat it because they think if you're modern, you eat white maize, which is only having carbohydrates.
Okay.
Same with tea. People would drink hot water with sugar.
So you are suggesting that we should be careful about what we adopt from.
Yes, we can take things from
other cultures.
We can learn from other cultures and take what we need.
Not wholesale adoption of.
Yes. Otherwise, we lose ourselves, and that's why I argue that Africans are at a crossroads.
Okay.
Because one leg is being African, one leg is being Western, and they cannot be Western completely.
That's a phenomenon I noticed among Africans here. They don't feel totally African, and they don't feel also totally European. There's a sort of
This contradiction.
Am I European or am I African? So where do you stand? Are you an African?
Yes, I'm an African. And I would say that one process which...
What do you think makes an African?
You just have to rediscover yourself. But I would say you need to become European first in order to become an African.
Oh, that's a very... can you explain, please?
Yes. If a child in my own village is learning English, anything he or she is learning is in English, like an English child. This child has never been to England. That it is through that medium that they try to see
English language.
Yes, their worldview is from another perspective. They have to perform in the same language. They have to compete in that same language. They have to compete in the global economy using that language, which is not their own. They've never been there. They don't have the facilities even to have it properly. What will be left of this person? I've been studying in a language of mine. I've been competing through these universities, writing things in a language which is not my own. If I would be writing in Luo, I think I would have finished all my research on time.
Was that what informed Ngugi wa Thiong'o to switch to writing in Kikuyu? He refused to...
I'm not very sure what motivated him to do that, but that could be one of the steps. We understand.
So you think you're advocating that Africa, we should start to use our languages?
Yes. Why do that is very important, because let's take the example of publications.
Okay.
right now in the Netherlands, there's so many books being published because it's now possible to publish books within the Netherlands. Previously, books were published within the Anglo-Saxon setting, so they had to approve it before anything could be published. But now you see that with the access to equipment and the knowledge, they start publishing in their own language, and you see so many books. That tells you that there's a big difference when you still have to borrow another language or something from another culture in order to express who you are.
It is, it is funny, but it's also very sad when you look at we don't take our languages seriously.
No.
In Europe, everybody's fighting to keep its.
Yes, they can learn the other languages, but yours is very important. That comes first.
There's a law in the Netherlands that immigrants must learn the language.
Yes, that is very. Yes, even in Sweden, people are encouraged to learn
But
Swedish.
in Africa, we take it for
No,
granted.
people come in and as they like.
Post the language or not.
Yes, but language is also a problem in Africa because of the complexity. Because of the artificial construction of countries within the continent, where people are lumped up together, nations are put together.
Who do not belong together?
Yes, nations are put together, mixed in a way which brings conflict instead of harmony, which can also benefit from the diversity that is in the people.
But this is a very complicated issue, and it has taken a lot of attention. It was even on the cover story of the New African magazine this month. What do you think Africa can start to do to break these barriers?
No, it's just, I think people should get back to knowing who they are. Being proud of being an African, knowing yourself as an African is a first step. You cannot present yourself to someone else if you don't know who you are.
Yeah, but
when people meet with friends or people you don't know, what is done in the first place is introduction. Introduction, which means telling someone who you are. Okay. If you don't know who you are, how do you start telling someone? How would you know the other person? How would the other person know you, even a better way to deal with you, if you don't know yourself? Okay. Yes, if you go to a doctor, for example, you always tell the doctor where you're feeling the pain. Is when the doctor will get to know what to prescribe, a test or a prescription. Okay. What we prescribe to other cultures, if we cannot tell who is an African.
Okay.
Yeah, and many times, whether people are highly educated or not, this is a problem across board. Some highly educated people also are not comfortable with who they are as Africans. Yes, hence people don't want to speak certain languages in their own places or don't want to speak their own languages at all. They only speak, the children are speaking in English or Swahili, for example, in Nairobi.
Parents are speaking English with their children.
Or Swahili. They don't speak their language at all. Yes, so they're shy, they're ashamed of who they are. So if you're already ashamed,
of whom you are.
Yes, what do you present out to other people? That's why we face other people as underdogs, because we are ashamed. Europeans are not ashamed of who they are. They just tell us, "Here, this is who I am," and someone takes you in the same way and with respect. But this kneeling attitude of us, this stooping position that it's very ingrained in us, that people have to, we give what we are not, in order for us to be accepted or to fit.
Viewers, this is a very interesting topic. I hope you are enjoying it the same way we are trying to figure out what Brother Otieno is trying to tell us. And this is really a big issue. The lack of identity.
Yes.
And the lack of self-confidence among Africans. How do you think this can be overcome?
I think there's need for renewal of consciousness within Africa, and this calls for looking for alternative ways of reaching out to Africans.
Any practical way?
Education is one way of reaching people, and I don't just mean Western education.
Yeah.
Yes, because we had education. The African education was there, and it gave people knowledge in different ways. Yes, and I think we can still get back to that, combining also with some of so-called modern approaches to education, because many of us already have access to these ways of doing things. We can complement that with what we have in order to rediscover Africa. For example, I go back home and I try to discuss with people, and even some organizations I meet, they come to Africa, for example, talk about democratization.
Yeah, okay.
They use terms like referendum, consensus, which is a very Swedish thing, or the polder model, where you disagree and disagree before you agree. But Africa has the best democratic form in terms of consultation. We only use new terms to describe the same thing. Hence, when you talk to people in rural areas about democracy, it's like a foreign thing. But if you find out...
it's formulated in a different language.
Yes, but if you find what exists within our own communities, it will even be very easy for them to start challenging the status quo that is giving them a problem at home. But because this is one way through which we can make this rediscovery and gain back the consciousness, which will help us to address our own problems at home, but also how we deal with people outside Africa.
I don't want to sound pessimistic. Do you think this is still feasible?
It's still feasible because many people, I'm very sure, even many intellectuals from Africa, no matter which country they come from, once you've been here for a long time enough, you'll really begin to appreciate Africa, and many do.
Okay, that's a positive.
And that appreciation of Africa is a starting point, because you get to know who you are. That's what I said, you need to be European first before you become an African.
Okay.
And so not so many people manage this complete circle, because many get lost in between, or they can't handle it.
But enough people are...
Yes, but some who go through it, hence they are returning to Africa, they are proud of being Africa, they can dress in African way, they can eat on African food, they can use their hands to eat and do many other things and dance to African music.
Okay, they're not ashamed of being African?
No.
Okay. You are very passionate about talking about Africa. How many African countries have you been to?
I've been to around 7 African countries.
7?
Yes.
And does that include Ghana?
Yes, that includes Ghana.
Where were you in Ghana? Do you remember?
Unfortunately, I've only been to one region. I've been in Accra, but even when I was in Accra, I tried as much as possible, depending on my schedule, I tried as much as possible to reach other parts of Accra. So then I see a cross-section of Accra. Okay. That means I even went to the lowest living places in Accra in order to see for myself.
How do people do?
Yeah, similarities with Kenya, but also with other African countries.
Did you see any similarity?
Yes, inequalities everywhere.
Everywhere, okay.
Yes, I went to Jamestown, I went to Dansoma, I looked at the waterside, I see how people live there. I lived in East Legon.
How different was it from the scene in Kenya?
Traffic jam was the same like Nairobi. Nairobi is worse, but there's a clogging in Accra. It depends on how the roads are constructed, but now they're working on it, at least in some way. On the other hand, although I was just there not for a long period of time, but generally people are friendly, which you find in Kenya too. But you never know with the internal contradictions or the kind of experiences people go through. It needs a long time to know. But I went through some slums. I tried to find. I went to the back of the rivers beyond the main roundabout there, where they're displaying artwork. But I went behind it to see people living in cardboard there. Yes. Then you see behind there what kind of conditions which I find in Kibera also. And that tells you that our condition in Africa is the same everywhere. So our problem, whether with governance or access to basic facilities, is a continental problem, which we ourselves have to find a way to solve.
On a continental level.
A continental level, for example, access roads, for example, to other countries, or how people connect between regions in order to do business, many other things. These are some things that we don't have to wait for Europeans to tell us. And secondly, I experienced that you have to phone a European country in order to speak to a neighboring country.
Which is ridiculous.
Yes, you ask why must you phone? Because we are still divided along those lines. And this tells you what kind of problem Africa is facing. And hence, access to different countries is still a problem. And it happens within countries themselves. So you can go to Wallerstein's discussion of the core and the periphery. So we have our own our cores and peripheries within Africa itself.
All right. Viewers, we'll take this short break. When we come back, we'll continue with Mr. Antony Otieno.
On this program, Focus on Africans, hosted by the popular Pan-African writer Femi Akomolafe, who has devoted his entire life to championing African cause. We highlight this problem and try to look for solutions. Focus on Africans is a program to watch to meet with those with passion to build a better African for ourselves and the coming generations. Focus on Africans. Together, we can build a better Africa.
Welcome back, viewers. We're still on Focus on Africans, and our Kenya brother Antony Otieno is our guest today. Are you collaborating with any university in Africa?
Yes, that's a very interesting question. You asked me about brain drain earlier on. Yes, one way to address the so-called brain drain is just to get people connected, get to know which Africans are where and what are they doing, and how can we exchange these experiences with our brothers and sisters back home, and even in the diaspora. So in one of the projects I worked in was to look at institutional building cooperation between governments and diaspora, and that includes also the academics, what kind of input they can give back to universities at home. So for example, we had a project which was focusing on how to get to facilitate not full complete return, but return of scholars from the diaspora to universities at home from time to time,
to give lectures
and to develop programs. In that way, then they exchange ideas on things that are new, and we did that with in Addis Ababa, but also worked with the University of Legon in Ghana. But also we've had contact with people in Nigeria. I went to Lagos and met a lot of people, even from Ibadan. And we passed on a lot of information, which
is it an ongoing project?
Yes, they are ongoing projects. That was in my previous work, but still, even in my current place of work, we have a lot of contact with these same universities. Yeah,
there was a suggestion that Africans in diaspora should also take the initiative of taking specific problems, like electricity problem, for example, trying to find solutions to it. There are enough African electrical engineers outside there. What do you think of that?
Yes, but I don't think it's
really wait for the politicians.
I don't think it's really a big problem that we don't have engineers, because if I take the example of Kenya, we have so many graduates, and I'm very sure Nigeria has the same.
Ghana?
Yes, and Ghana. Only that these people have not been, this resource has not been mobilized for home use.
Why can't the people in the diaspora also mobilize them? There are enough people here. Let's take a specific problem. Let's go and solve it. We are Africans. We have the brains. We have the...
Yes, but that needs specialized knowledge. There are some areas of technology, for example, which might need specialized knowledge. And then we ask how many Africans have had access to those specialized knowledge areas. It can be nanotechnology. It can be solar.
Now, we're talking about very basic electricity, for example.
Yes, but that's what I'm saying. Take, for example, what's happening in Lagos. I know that very well, or Nairobi. Yes, Lagos, everywhere there are generators. And we know that we have oil. Yes, and there are generators everywhere. And there's power blackouts. It has happened to many times. I could not write many things. We don't need a European to come and solve that. You don't even have to come from the diaspora, because there's oil there at home. The question is just find, that's one way. There's solar.
Generators are not the best solution to...
Yes, but there's oil at home. We have already had some resource. Compared to other countries who don't have oil, we might say, okay, other people don't have that. But it's not managed well to generate electricity. Secondly, we have one which we are blessed with, that is the sun.
And we're not utilizing it.
Yes, you ask, how many governments have put in dollars, for example, when the Nigeria government was launching satellite, they gave Chinese money to do that. Why wouldn't they create, mobilize such kind of a resource also to generate solar panels, which people can do from home? I'm very sure if you go to Nigeria, I'm told there are places where people can make gadgets, electrical or whatever style. You just give them a model and they'll make a similar one. That means we have the brains there at home, but we need the capital to back up that brain. And that applies to, even if I had the knowledge to bring back to Africa, where's the capital to back that up? We have to beg for that capital from Europe, and it will be a loan on our own people, which might not be paid, because they'll not even want to pay me, because they'll want to pay expertise from here. So Africa has to generate its own resources, capital, to back up its own scientists, to start developing their own things. And hence my call for political will in Africa.
All right. Yes. Let's move to this question of Barack Obama. You have your half-brother who now occupies the most powerful position. What was your feeling when he got elected?
I had mixed feelings. First was fear about whether this would be a possibility.
What do you mean
based on the history of the United States in terms of race. if finally people in the United States will accept someone else from another background, especially that kind of background.
No, I'm asking about when you got elected. What did you feel?
Yes, but this was my first reaction.
You were afraid for
Would it be possible? And I said, okay, the next thing, if it is possible, if Americans show that it is possible, that would be change of heart and change of mind, which might also have implications or ramifications elsewhere for how attitudes that people have towards Africans. And another thing is, when you look at how he was attacked and what kind of issues were raised about him, they tried in so many ways to bring him down in many ways, but this was not possible, also because of something that he himself built up from when he was young and through his college time. So, for example, there was not a question of him lacking intellect. So if you could put a measure for what you need in order to be successful, to do things in the West, he had those things, despite the color of his skin or the background of one of his parents. And for me, that was very important. That was a lesson for how we see things in terms of relationship between cultures and people, but also how serious we take people from Africa. An African, in my view, is still not seen as someone who's competent. Competent. But is it our skin which determines competence, or what is in our heads? I'm very sure if you have surgeons who open up people's brains, they'll find it's the same color. And probably those who deal with blood will tell you the same. And those who open up muscles and those things, and veins will tell you that they're made of the same stuff. But then, for me, it was a big lesson, a global lesson for interracial relationships, but also attitudes towards Africa. In Africa itself, we had a problem also in terms of ethnic questions, where certain ethnic groups have been marginalized because of who they are. Kenya was one example where someone was told he could not be a president because he's a Luo.
You think that there are lessons we can learn from that?
There are lessons we can learn from that, because then you look at people's quality, regardless of which...
Without the ethnic background?
Yes.
Okay. Are you related to him in any way?
Yeah, when things like this happen, people try to establish linkages. I only know that I live like 20 minutes drive from his home. Where his father is buried right now. And I've had a chance to talk to his grandmother, Sarah. And Sarah knows people in my place, where my parents are living.
You met the grandmother?
Yes, I met the grandmother. And the only linkage I have is that he's got Luo origin. So he's from the Luo nation, which I also belong to. So we share that heritage. And but he's from another clan.
Have you had occasion to correspond with him?
The only correspondence I've had because I've been a member of his campaign. Yes, from the start. So I was more in the mobilizing team, which we did over the internet. And I used to get communication. Still, they send me things, but not that directly.
Okay, apart from reading a lot of books and thinking about African problems, how do you relax?
I relax when other people are happy and smiling. Yes.
What do you do to make them happy?
That what I do with them doesn't cause them pain.
Giving them hope.
Yes, if what I do with them makes them happy, that's my happiness. And it's one of my goals that whenever I meet people, that I should be, what comes out of me is something that gives joy to the other side. But I do like music. Dancing and
what type of music?
Listening to music.
What type of music do you enjoy?
No, I have my priorities with music, and now I'm a little bit stricter with it. African music comes first. Yes, so all my music collection is African music first. Yes, and that music is, I have Luo music, quite a lot of it. I have music from other Kenyan groups, but also have music from other African countries. And then I give a little bit of time to classical music if it is there. And the rest of other music comes third.
I was surprised you're an African, you're an intellectual, an African who lives in Europe. Your girlfriend told me that you're a good cook.
Yes, that is...
what went wrong?
That is not strange, because I learned to cook when I was 8.
You learned to cook from...
My mother, when she was doing her business in the market, she left me to warm the food at home.
So you are?
For my younger sibling.
Okay.
Yes, so
you enjoy cooking?
Yes, I like to eat, and if you like to eat, then you have to cook. And despite the fact that we had roles well defined in our cultures in Africa,
yeah.
It wasn't a kind of discrimination or a sign
Yeah.
of weakness for people to take up certain roles when it is necessary.
Okay.
Still in Africa, people with less members of families supporting, even parents participate in different ways.
Okay.
And it was a small setting, so things were much easier. Now, even people who live in Africa in big cities experience the same kind of life conditions like here in Europe, which forces people to start playing other roles which they would have not played had they been back in the village decades ago. And for me, it's not a big issue, and I like to take care of people, and this is also one of them. When I make food for people that visit me or live with me, that's part of the
taking care of them. Okay.
Yes.
This program is about how to move Africa development agenda forward.
Yes.
Do you have any project going on in Africa?
Yes, I have projects going on which I myself has co-founded, but also I do work in collaboration with other people doing things, not only in Kenya but also in other countries. Yeah, because I've also done a lot of work on project management, and also development studies was my background. So I try to do analytical issues. I do analysis of development issues from global to continental level, but also specifically
the micro levels.
Yes.
Okay.
And I share these kind of experiences, which I've gained also by going to Asia and other places with our brothers and sisters in Africa, how they can improve their programs, those who want to start, how they can start them, those who have them, how can they run them effectively to really make an impact in society. So mostly I do that. On the sides, I also try to connect people who, if I know their programs or possibilities that can benefit people in Africa. For example, I'm very much a fan of education. So anything to do with education, technical education, is also one of my passions. So I encourage people a lot, because Africa cannot develop without skills. Skills is not just writing on paper as we do, but we need people on the ground who maintain this equipment and so on. All our blacksmiths are gone in Africa, and I'm very sure if you go to Ghana, go to Nigeria,
the
go to South Africa,
blacksmiths.
Yes, they are gone.
No
one put any money or resources to back them up to keep that skill. Is gone. So we are relying for cheap products from elsewhere, just because we've lost our own. Hence, I said we have lost so many things about Africa, and now is the time again to revisit that. So even I'm encouraging our people to work on skills training at a very, very local level.
Based on indigenous knowledge?
Both indigenous and modern.
Okay.
Because some issues you need to address now. Housing, for example, needs new ways of addressing. Climatic conditions have changed, so you might not use the same kind of materials
people are using
or in those other times. So you have to need new ways of doing that, and you need people to do them.
All right.
Europeans are not going to come to do some of those things for us, or their companies will do, but if we can afford it. But we can't afford it if our people are not having source of income, which comes from their activities.
So your project in Kenya is addressing some of these issues?
Yes, my project is addressing community development, skills training, but also on issues that are affecting people. For example, I have a project on addiction treatment. Addiction is a big thing in Africa, although not discussed that much.
All right.
Yes.
Yeah, we're getting to the end of the program. Yes. What are your plans for the future? Are you going to stay permanently in Europe, or do you have plans to go back to Africa?
No, my affinity to Africa is not questionable. I'm an African, and I'll remain an African by heart and in all ways and all times. My being outside the continent will not tamper with that at all. So I have my networks here, and the kind of work I'm doing entails traveling to other continents and other contexts. That will continue, but whatever I gain out of that will be plowed back to Africa.
So yes, so you are always thinking about Africa.
Yes, so what I do, even now, my research is about Africa. If I would be working for a university or an international organization, that work focuses on Africa. Yes,
so whatever you do now, everything's focused on Africa.
Everything is focused on Africa.
I'm happy to have you on Focus on Africans, because this is also a program where we try to see, we've got the resources in Africa. What are we doing wrong? What can we do to improve our material conditions. I mean, I am glad that you're sharing your ideas with us, and I wish you all the best.
Yes, thank you very much,
Thank you.
and it was a pleasure to talk to you. And I think this is also a noble project that will target the attitude change in Africa. I think that is also where the problem is. So
the attitude
change. So probably through these kind of programs, we'll begin to raise issues that will make people think twice about what they're doing out here in the diaspora, but also what are we doing about our situation in the continent. So I think it's a good idea that you started this program, and I wish that you could extend it to other countries across Europe.
I will try to do our best. And are there people you would like to say hello to in Ghana? The colleagues you met in Ghana, if you want to say hello to them.
Yes, there are so many people I met in Ghana. I have Dr. Mariama at Legon University, but also Dr. Alassane. He's also a teacher at the African Study Center. But I also have Nana, who is living in Dansoma. He took care of me very well to show me the paths where real Ghanaians live. So it was a pleasure to meet them there, and I'll keep working with them closely.
Thank you very much, viewers, for watching the Focus on African. I hope it has been as interesting to you as it was talking to brother Antony Otieno from Kenya. Yeah, until next week when we meet again, when we bring you another edition of Focus on Africans. I've been lucky to work with a very fantastic crew, even in the terrible cold. Smiler Sulemana is manning the camera. Mariano Boye is there, helping out. Rami Akomalafe is also doing his best. And Grey Westerfeld has been very supportive. Foster Agbule is giving us kudos and is also helping out. My name is Femi Akomalafe. Until next week when we come back to you again with another edition of Focus on Africa, I say Ireo.